This is quite loud. I already have quite a loud voice. Tell me if I'm hurting your ears. Welcome to today's lunchtime chat. This here is Sabrina D'Angelo, and she's called a body poet, basically because she makes poetry with her body. That's a fairly good explanation, I should hope. Sabrina's a performer and director working in physical theatre, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. She's got a Bachelor of Acting from the Theatre Nepean, which is in Sydney, and a postgraduate diploma in puppetry from the VCA just around the corner there. And just for a bit of an explanation of her work, it combines non-verbal forms of performance like dance, puppetry, clowning and mime to tell funny, moving and complex stories that engage with contemporary issues. So, hello.
Thanks for having me. If you guys want to move up, you'll be most welcome. It's like 3 separate parties, but that's okay. Yeah, move the couch. Great.
It's gonna take a long time.
Get your feet involved. Cool.
So first up, I guess I just want to ask how you yourself would describe what you do. Whether that's you want to do a dance to describe it non-verbally, or I'll leave it up to you.
Thanks. I thought that was a pretty good description. But mainly I'm trying to... I came up with this term body poetry because I think it's quite a funny term. And also, what I'm trying to do is a combination. I don't know, I kind of didn't feel like there was an exact word for it. So it is a bit of mime, but in no way am I trained or proficient mime. I have a friend who has studied mime in London for 7 years, and she's like a proper mime, and there's no way I'm a mime. But a bit of that kind of stuff. Also a bit of dance. Also, I'm no way a dancer. But I kind of like to explore physical stuff in quite literal ways, but then quite abstract ways as well, like contemporary dance. And also clowning is a really big influence, and physical comedy. And maybe we'll talk a bit more about that later. And that's what I'm mainly trying to explore at the moment. And puppetry is probably where I've most come from. I trained at the VCA doing their puppetry course, which sadly no longer exists. And since leaving there in 2008, have worked mainly as a puppeteer. And it's only been in the last kind of 6 months where I've been really trying to go, oh, hang on, what else is there except for puppetry, and how else can I use these other ways of performing and creating theatre that are more interesting than just puppets. So that's mainly it.
I'm really interested by the blend that you've got going on. That was pretty much every theatre discipline in one bang. So is that something you think is important, across the arts in general, to have a bit of a broader knowledge, or where did that exploration come from? What made you decide that you needed to do all these different things at once?
I guess I like to see stuff, when I see shows or theatre or even TV shows or movies, and kind of go, oh, that's really amazing the way that person does that, and that's really amazing how that group works like that. And then you kind of want to steal ideas from everywhere and mash them together so that you make your own thing. And I think most artists do that in their own way, and it's just how broad you go. Some people use really vastly different kinds of media and use digital technologies and robots and kind of etching and other you just jam stuff together. And I think that's really where contemporary art is at the moment. There's not a lot of, maybe not that much of sticking to quite old traditions or not messing with them a bit. So I think it comes from being influenced and just loving lots of different kinds of things and thinking, yeah, they would work well together. And also every show you do, every work of art you create is just an experiment. It's a finished product that you try to sell to people and have as a kind of made kind of ready thing, but it's always just you trying, like, just messing around with stuff and seeing what works and making mistakes in a very public way often, and that's just kind of how you learn, I suppose.
So what are some of your influences?
Well, and we were just having a chat about this earlier, but I'm really influenced by physical comedy and kind of an old school silent film clowning. So when I was a teenager, I was really influenced by Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, especially Buster Keaton. I don't know if you know his films, but he was a contemporary of Charlie Chaplin, and he was called the Great Stone Face because his face was always very blank, but he could, like, he was very full of expression, even with such a kind of minimal use of facial expressions, as opposed to Charlie Chaplin, who was very kind of clowny in his and very kind of panto. And Buster Keaton was an incredible stunt man as well. He grew up with this carny family and was always, like, from the day he was born, being thrown downstairs and being in his parents' crazy carny stunt act. So he just grew up an incredibly resilient person. So I was kind of aspired to have that sort of circus style strength and, like, you know, strong woman power kind of thing, but I'm not really, I don't have the discipline to train that much. But the way he kind of could do so, like, little and express so much, I think is an incredible thing. And there's a lot of people say things to the effect of, you know, less is more when it comes to comedy, and I think you'd be surprised at how little you can do, and for it to be expressive. And I think that's a really fun thing to explore. But I also really love making faces and being really ridiculous with my body. So yeah, I'm kind of trying both of those at the moment.
A fairly, like, understandable pathway from, you know, Sabrina as a little kid making faces and doing weird stuff, or is it something that, like, suddenly you woke up and that happened and you started studying it?
I was a very serious child, like a very shy, serious, book-reading, studious child. And then when I was about 17, I went to acting school and was very serious, kind of angst-ridden teenager too, and highly thought I was very intellectual and went to acting school, but saw myself as, like, pursuing an academic future or being a human rights lawyer. So then in second year of acting school, we had a semester of clowning, and our teacher had studied with this guy in France called Jacques Lecoq, who is kind of the sort of godfather of physical theatre and clowning these days, and so we did a semester of like discovering your inner clown. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can say about this that gets quite deep, but the sort of short version of it is that you do all these exercises to sort of unearth your inner clown, and your inner clown is sometimes kind of hard to unearth because it's the part of you that is like the part of you that you're most ashamed of, so the part of you that you kind of try to hide as much as you can from the rest of the world. And so that's inherently hilarious because, it's just something that you're very embarrassed or scared about showing the world. So, you do this thing where you and your classmates undergo all these exercises, some of which are really awful. There's one called the torture, where you just kind of have to come out on stage with nothing prepared. You just come out on stage and everyone claps your arrival on stage, and the only instruction is make the audience laugh. And you just have to kind of just make stuff up, you just have to kind of come up with funny stuff. So, that's called the torture for obvious reasons. But it was amazing, and it kind of like lifted the lid off my angsty teenage serious self. And my clown was the dumbest clown of the class, and she was like really simple, so simple she couldn't even talk. Like she only sort of had these noises, and yeah, it was kind of when I discovered at 17 my like how fun being silly was. And so yeah, it was a kind of like childhood that came like way too late, but yeah, I kind of like just discovered the silliness and absurdity and finding humour from the sort of secret, shameful, embarrassing parts of yourself. And I think that's when the journey started, and I'm still really interested in that. That's still stuff that I try to explore in my shows.
Are you still exploring the secret, shameful, cruel parts as well?
Yeah, definitely. And the show I'm working on at the moment is for the Melbourne Comedy Festival, which will happen in April, and it's called Body Poet, and it's just an hour of non-verbal, ridiculous clowning, and the provocation came from the person who's going to direct it, and he said, "You're not allowed to intellectualize or conceptualize things too much," because I always do that. I sort of make it really dense, and it's about these themes, and it's got this intricate storyline and all this sort of stuff I try to jam in there. And he said that 50% of it each night has to be improvised. So that's kind of what I'm working with. So right at the moment, I'm like trying to come up with all this stuff, which is hilarious, but each night I've got to like throw half of it away and just kind of come up with funny stuff in front of an audience of, I don't know, 80 people. So that's really, I don't know, that's a great starting point, I feel, because it's a bit terrifying, and I want to have stuff to work with. You pack your proverbial toolkit full of material that you can call upon, but yeah, there's something amazing about just going, oh yeah, just see what you can come up with on the fly. And another kind of one of my influences, which is a bit more kind of closer to home, is this guy called Phil Burgess, whose character is called Dr. Brown. And he won the Barry Award at the Comedy Festival last year, which is the kind of the big Best Show award. And I met him a couple of years ago in Adelaide. We were both doing shows at the Adelaide Fringe, and my show was this very kind of serious, intimate kind of puppet show, which was very kind of complex and very kind of rigid. It was set to a score, so nothing could change each night. And Phil was doing this show that he was literally just making up every night. And I was talking to him one night, and he said, "Yeah, I'm over this 20-show season. By the end of it, I'm gonna hopefully have a show." And I was like, just flabbergasted. I was like, "Wow, you can do that? You can just like use the audience each night to test out your material on." And I saw the show a number of times, and they're all like quite different. And some shows were hilarious and just full of gold and brilliance, and some shows just like were awful, like really painful, because his clown is like trying to push the boundaries of how little you can do. So he like literally doesn't do a lot, but it's like mostly very, very funny. Or he does very boring pedestrian things, like very kind of domestic things, and you kind of see them in a new light. So that was kind of an influence of this show. So the sort of the magic of improvisation and spontaneity, and the sheer gold that can come from you being terrified in front of an audience of paying customers, and not just your friends who will love whatever you do. But I think it's important to challenge yourself, or to get someone else to challenge you if you don't have the discipline. And yeah, with each kind of, I see each show that I do, or each kind of project I embark on, as like as a new set of challenges, and because I'm still I'm young and emerging, so it's the best time to do that. You know, who cares? Nobody cares if you make mistakes. You might get a crappy review from the Herald Sun, but that doesn't matter, you know. So it's like, it's now, it's when you're a teenager and when you're in your 20s, or at any stage really, like it doesn't matter, honestly, what other people think. But it's like, definitely when you're young, you're the most fearless, I think, and it's such a great opportunity to just make all the mistakes you can.
So are there any other tools that you use to keep yourself on your toes and keep your work fresh apart from improv? That's obviously one that works quite well. How else do you keep yourself re-inspired rather than having to go back to basics?
Well, it's hard when you're out of an institution in a lot of ways. Like, you go through school and, you know, you get so used to sitting in a place and, you know, them just being told what to do for 8 hours a day. And then you go to uni and then that's kind of the same thing, because you've got this structure. You turn up and someone sets you assignments and someone, you know, marks the assignments. So you've got all this external discipline that kind of keeps you on your toes. So then when you leave and you go out into the world, which is a terrifying place, you have to find ways to set yourself these things, and deadlines are a great way to do that. You just say, you know, I'm going to register for a show in the Melbourne Fringe Festival, which anyone can do, provided you have $330 for the registration fee. That's all you need. And then you just got to make a show by September. So deadlines is that kind of cool way to do that sort of stuff, because, you know, you got to write your blurb and say what the show is, you know, 5 months before it's a show. 5 months probably before you've started making the show. So I try to kind of, just with the last few shows, you know, when you write your blurb or you send out your press releases, you kind of, you kind of present it as a challenge to yourself. And I guess in the making of the shows, I try to emulate the experience of being in a school sometimes. So I want, for this show, for this comedy festival show, to have a bit of music in it. So I'm practicing these instruments that I kind of want to use, and that's a great way of, like, you know, 10 o'clock every day is my, like, piano accordion practice session, and that's like, you know, that's like going to class. And also other various things, like there's a belly dancing segment in the show, and I'm not a belly dancer, so I've got to learn how to belly dance. And there's a contact improvisation, there's like a contact juggling piece in the show, and I'm not a juggler, so I've got to learn how to do that. So I'm like, I kind of set myself these tasks for which I've got like 2 months to be an expert contact juggler and an expert belly dancer for a 1 minute gag in a 58-minute show. So it's kind of ridiculous, and thank God I've got a bit of time at the moment, because otherwise, you know, I'm not getting paid for it. But it's like, it's a fun way to keep training when you're outside of a training institution, because it's hard. Otherwise, if you don't practice your skills and learn new skills, it can be hard to keep developing. And collaborating is also a great way to do that, you know, with artists who are your colleagues, with artists who are a lot more experienced than you, and mentors is a great way to do that. Just find someone you adore and ask them to mentor you. That's what I did. And just like learn, suck from other people and give back to them what you have, you know, so you can, keep feeding yourself, and that allows you to put stuff back out there too.
Was all of the official training that you did, like did an opinion in Sydney and at VCA for puppetry, was that really useful? Like, was that a worthwhile time over, you know, however many years that took?
Yeah, so I did a Bachelor of Acting, and that was great, and that was I just came out of high school, which in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have done. And acting schools are not always that keen on taking you right out of high school anyway. They kind of want you to be a bit older and have more experience. So I would, if I would do it all again, I would wait for that. But the experience itself was amazing, and you know, you're with these 17 people for 3 years, and you like really just, you know, even if you don't like them, you just gotta like stay with them. But you know, there's something amazing about being in an ensemble of that many people for that amount of time, and nowhere else do you get that experience of just being with this small group of people, and doing all this very different kind of stuff, different kind of training with them. So I think that's really valuable, and if anyone is thinking about performance, then and doing a bachelor in that kind of thing, I think is great experience. The puppetry course doesn't exist anymore, so sorry if you're interested in doing a puppetry course at VCA. And that was great, but it was a bit hit and miss. Going to the VCA is great because they're, even with all the funding cuts and the kind of consumption of it by Melbourne Uni, it's still a greatly resourced institution. And while you're there, you're just surrounded by other young artists who are also full of ideas and want to make great art. So that's one of the amazing things about going to the VCA. But you know, institutions aren't for everyone, and you know, you can get used to being a bit, I don't know, reliant on it. And if you kind of are just a young artist and you want to make work, you don't need to be in an institution for that. You know, you can just you know, make your own stuff and make your own deadlines and make your own projects. But the puppetry course was great because it was such an introduction to something that I didn't really know anything about. And there was a big puppetry festival on in Perth just as I was starting the course. And there was 4 of us in the course. Yeah, 4 of us. So there were more teachers than students, which is probably one of the reasons they cut it. It wasn't financially very viable. So you know, you get a lot of you get a lot of time and space to really, you know, you're not in a class, and it's not like you're in a lecture hall with 500 other people. So we all got some money to go over to Perth for this puppetry festival and saw 3 weeks of puppet shows, which was a great, like, you know, introduction into the world of puppet theatre, which is a scary place sometimes. So you know, it's like, I think going to institutions, yeah, helpful, maybe not. I don't know. You can always start it, and if you don't like it, you can pull out. But yeah, I think that they're great mainly for the people you'll meet, who you might go on to collaborate with, which can be a slower process when you're just kind of feeling your way out in the real world.
What's the best external learning experience you've had, like in terms of maybe collaborations or festivals or shows that you've learned from?
I think the best kind of experience of just like having to learn on the go is the first time I put on a show at the Fringe Festival, which was a couple of years ago. And that's amazing, because unless you've got a producer and a kind of other team of people you're working with, you have to do everything yourself, and that, you know, you just have to like figure out how to do it. And the Fringe Festival are very supportive because they hold forums, and they're always like very quick to send you an email back or to answer your call. But yeah, you've got to be in charge of all your publicity and marketing, which is like, if you're not into it, that can be a really stressful part of getting your work out there, like writing media releases, you know, like hounding media outlets for an article in the Northcote Leader or whatever. You know, it's like, it's not for everyone. So if you've got a friend who wants to do that, who wants to produce your show, then that's great. But you just have to learn that, and that was amazing. That was like, oh, okay, not only do I have to make the show, I've got to be my own publicist and administrator and financier and and all of the other stuff that you kind of don't think about when you just want to make a show and do the show. But it can be kind of stressful when the show is up and running and all you want to concentrate every day is, doing a good show, and you're thinking about bums on seats and what the reviewers are in that night. You just want your whole brain to be in the art end of it. So that's that's just something that takes a few years, I think, to figure out. And I'm still very much in the early end of it. So the last show I did at Melbourne Fringe, I was really, I was backstage just before I was going like, oh my God, there's that person here and that person here, and, and just being a bit stressed out about it. So the next show I'm not doing any of that stuff, so that's a really kind of nice thing, especially because comedy festival's a bigger, uglier beast too. It's a kind of scarier adventure, so it's nice to not know when the media are coming or not know when, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, get a friend to do it. Ask your mum to do it.
That's good advice. I think we might wrap up in a sec. Is there anything that anyone wanted to ask Sabrina? Nope? Good. Well then, I guess my last question is a very broad question, but do you have any incredible advice that you've kind of learnt from your experience doing this?
Do I? You've got to get really good at long and short-term planning. And so this is what I'm learning at the moment, especially when you're applying for grants, which you have to apply for with whatever art field you're in, because they take a long time to happen. So you've got to be thinking about what you're doing next month, but also the rest of the year, and also probably next year and the year after, because when you apply for a grant, it will take you a month to write if you're like me, and then it'll take maybe 2 to 3 months until they tell you if you've got it or not, and then you get to use the money, hopefully. But while you're using that money, there'll be all these other grants that come up, and so you have to get really good at drawing up timelines and thinking this time next year, what do I want to be doing? So think big, but write it all down. Yeah, that's probably the kind of biggest thing I've learnt in the last couple of years. But there are so many great grants for young and emerging artists. There's Art Start, which is if you've just come out of an institution. And there's Jump, which I've just gotten, which is a mentoring program. And that's amazing because it's literally just funding for a project, and they also support your relationship with a mentor. So that's amazing. And lots of other early career, young so just try for as much as you can, because then if you hit 30, you can't apply for them anymore, or you've been out of a school for 5 years, you so just try and get all of them while you're still, under 25 or whatever. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening.